There's one piece of advice that's quietly wrecking more language learners than anything else, and it's one that almost everyone repeats like gospel. Speak from day one. Open your mouth immediately. Just start talking, make mistakes. That's how you learn, and it sounds brave and it sounds active, and it's one of the most damaging things that you can do as a brand new language learner. But here's what nobody tells you. Trying to speak before your brain is ready isn't courage. It's firing a weapon that you never loaded. You're standing there trying to pull the trigger on an empty chamber, wondering why nothing is coming out. Today, I'm going to show you the thing that fast learners do that nobody seems to talk about, okay? A quiet, almost lazy looking phase at the start that feels like you're doing nothing and is actually the whole reason that you end up speaking the language smoothly while everyone else stays stuck in the baby talk for years phase. And a bit later, I'll show you how to figure out exactly when you're loaded enough to start talking. But first, you need to see why day one speaking backfires, because once you see what's really happening up in your head, you'll never feel guilty about staying quiet again. Let me tell you about the smartest thing that I did when I was learning Mandarin, because at the time, it probably looked insane. For the first long stretch, I barely spoke at all. While everyone in every forum seemed to be screaming, output, output, tutor, speak from day one, I just didn't. I shut up and listened. Hours a day pouring the language into my ears, understanding more and more, and saying almost nothing back. Sometimes it would honestly feel a little bit embarrassing and it felt like I was chickening out or something. But my actual plan was to stay silent for a whole year. And then I blew my own plan in the dumbest way possible. One night, my birthday of all nights, a few drinks in, I got a little overconfident and I just started talking. Completely 100% unplanned. And that's the part that still gets me. It just came out. Not perfectly, but it flowed way better than it had any right to, because by then my head was absolutely full of the language. I wasn't dragging words up from nothing. They were already there, waiting. And from that night, it snowballed fast until I was sitting with my wife's family having real conversations for hours. Compare that to the learner who spoke from day one and spends 6 months stammering out the same 3 broken sentences. My silence was never me falling behind. My silence was me loading up. Now, I know how that probably sounds. Should I just sit there in silence? Well, it's not silence forever, and it's not silence doing nothing. It's the single most productive thing you can do early, and I'm going to prove exactly why. So here's the order of operations for today. Why speak from day one is so seductive and wrong, what's physically happening in your brain when you stay quiet, and how to know the precise moment you've loaded enough to start firing. Turns out that this was never about talent. It was about sequence. Let me describe a moment you've probably lived. You finally worked up the nerve to use your new language with an actual person. You've got a sentence half built in your head, and then it just jams. The words won't come, your face goes hot, you blurt something mangled, they tilt their head, and the little voice goes, "Yep, I'm just bad at speaking." So let's do a quick read on where you are right now. A simple 1 to 4. 1, the second someone speaks to you, your mind goes completely blank. 4, you can hold your own in a real back and forth. Wherever you landed, and plenty of you are sitting at 1 or 2, notice one thing. That blank mind, jammed up feeling is actually not a speaking problem. It's an input problem wearing a speaking costume. And that one distinction changes everything about what you should do next. So why does everyone preach speak from day one? Well, a few reasons, and they all sound pretty reasonable. 1, it feels active. Speaking feels like progress, listening feels passive, like slacking. 2, the apps adore it, because Talk Now makes a great notification and great little streak. And 3, the one with an actual grain of truth. Somewhere along the way, you heard learn by doing, and that you've got to get used to it to get it. And for a pure doing skill like riding a bike, fine. But a language isn't only a doing skill. It's a recognition skill first. Before your mouth can produce a word, your brain has to have heard it, decoded it, and filed it away enough times to grab it on demand. The speak from day one crowd quietly skips that entire step. They basically confuse practicing something you already have with conjuring something out of thin air. So practicing output when there's input in the tank? Fantastic. Forcing output when the tank is bone empty? That's not practice, that's just rehearsing your mistakes until they stick. So let me draw you the picture that finally made this click for me. Imagine 3 cups lined up in a row. The first cup is your ears, everything that you hear. The second cup is your brain, everything that you actually understand. And the third cup is your mouth, everything that you can say. Here's the rule, and it does not bend. Water only ever flows in one direction, down the line. You pour water into the first cup, your ears, by listening. And you keep pouring, and at first, nothing seems to happen further down. But once that ear's cup fills, it overflows into the second, and suddenly you're understanding things that you couldn't a month ago. And only once that second cup, your comprehension, is full and spilling over, does anything reach the third cup, your mouth. Speaking. That's the entire machine right there. Your speaking is just the overflow from your understanding, which effectively means your listening ceiling becomes your speaking floor. You will never speak better than you can understand. So when someone tells a beginner with 3 bone-dry cups to just speak, they're asking them to pour out of a cup with nothing in it. You cannot produce what the brain hasn't taken in yet. This isn't a confidence thing. It's kind of just plumbing. Okay, so here's the reframe that's going to take the guilt out of it, and it's the thing that I wish someone had drilled into me from day one. When you're in that early phase, listening like crazy and barely speaking, you are not behind. You're not being lazy, and you're not too scared to speak. You are loading. Every single minute you spend understanding input is a minute you're building the exact thing you'll speak with later. So don't think of this as waiting to speak. Think of it as loading your weapon. And when you finally do fire it, it'll come out clean, at least mostly clean, because there's something in the actual chamber. The day one crowd has just been yanking an empty trigger for months. Click, 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 drilling their own bad habits deeper with every pull. Silence isn't the absence of progress, okay? Early on, silence basically is the progress. So how long are we talking? How long do you stay in this phase? And here is where I need to dispel some of the panic, because some people hear silent phase and picture staying mute for a year or two. Now, the silent phase isn't some fixed sentence that you serve. It's a stage you graduate from, and how long it takes depends on your language and how much input that you're actually getting regularly. So the real question was never, how long do I stay silent? It's really, how do I know when my cups are full enough to start pouring out of them? And that's the thing that almost nobody can answer for themselves, because they're not measuring anything. They're just vibing, hoping, guessing. And this is genuinely why I have my students track their input, so "am ready to speak" stops being a vague feeling and turns into something that they can actually see. And that exact question, how much should I load before I start, for my language, is the thing that the little silent phase calculator is built for. You tell it what you're learning, and instead of a guess, it gives you a real target to load towards. But actually, the headline here is simpler than any number. You don't start speaking when a calendar says so. You start when the cup overflows. And this isn't just my pet theory. It has a name and a mountain of research under it. The linguist Stephen Krashen, one of the most cited names in the entire field of language acquisition, called it the silent period. It's right there in his 1982 book, Principles and Practice in Second Language Acquisition. To save you the time, his whole input hypothesis comes down to this. We acquire language essentially in one way, by understanding messages, by taking in input that we can actually follow. Speaking emerges later on its own once enough has gone in. And you've actually watched this happen with every single person that you've ever met, because every baby does it. A baby spends roughly a year just listening, soaking up sound, babbling, saying nothing that we would consider words before that famous first word arrives. And nobody leans over the crib going, "You're falling behind, you should really be making sentences by now." We let them load. We instinctively know that listening comes first. But somewhere in adulthood, we forgot the one thing that we all did perfectly as babies. Now, let me address the obvious objection, because I can already hear it. But if I never practice speaking, how am I ever going to speak? Fair. So let me be crystal clear about what I am not saying. I'm not saying that speaking doesn't matter. I am not saying to be silent forever. Speaking is the whole goal, and of course you're going to practice it. What I am saying is that it's a sequence, not a toggle. Silent phase first, speaking second. You load, then you fire. And when you've actually loaded, the practice barely feels like struggle. It's like unblocking something that was already sitting there. And the people who skip the loading don't reach speaking well. They just spend their speaking time fighting and flailing, where the loaded person spends it flowing. And here's why getting this wrong or backwards is so expensive, because speaking too early doesn't just slow you down. It can actively set you back in 2 nasty ways. First, fossilization. When you force out sentences before your brain has good models to copy, you don't just make neutral little mistakes that fix themselves. You risk carving grooves. Especially in Chinese, I've seen this myself. You drill a wrong tone, a butchered sound, a broken sentence pattern over and over until it becomes a hardened habit. And now it's 10 times harder to fix than if you'd never built it. You're not learning to speak, you're learning to speak wrong fluently. And second, the confidence tax. Every time you force a conversation you're not ready for and it falls apart, your brain quietly logs, "I'm bad at this hurts," and the little part of you starts ducking it. Enough of those and you quit, not because you couldn't have done it, but because someone told you to fire before you loaded, and then you blamed yourself for the misfire. Real quick, if this is already rearranging something in your head, you're going to like the rest of what's on here. So go ahead and subscribe. Cool? Cool. All right, back to it. Now, the honest part, because the silent phase has a catch nobody warns you about. there are actually 2 ways to blow it, not one. Way 1, you ignore all this, speak from day 1, and fossilize. Way 2, and this one's more sneaky. You take it too far, get scared of speaking, and hide in a silent phase forever, loading and loading, never firing, because "I'm not ready yet" is the most comfortable excuse on the planet. The whole game is knowing the right window, loaded enough to speak well, not so paralyzed you never start. And that, knowing when you're genuinely ready, getting the right input in the right order, and having someone actually nudge you to open your mouth at the right time is the most important thing, arguably, inside of what we do in Fluency Formula. We take the "am I ready" question just off your plate. But I want to be clear about this. None of the loading phase requires me or Fluency Formula. You can and should start today completely on your own. And if that "how do I know I'm ready" question is the one nagging at you, that's the exact thing that the silent phase calculator I mentioned before is built to settle. You plug in your language and your situation, and instead of guessing, you get a rough target to load toward and a feel for what ready actually looks like. I built it for you. It costs nothing. It's super quick, and it's linked down below for whenever you're ready for it. There's no homework, no catch. It just turns "am I ready" from a guess into something that you can actually see. So practically, how do you run a good silent phase? Well, there's 3 things. First, flood your ears with input that you can actually follow, stuff where the context carries you even if you don't catch every word. Not noise so far over your head it's just static. That's what fills the cups. Second, make it active, not background, okay? Actually reach for meaning. Don't just have the show playing in the other room while you do the dishes. Passive sound can barely trickle in. Focused listening pours. And third, let speaking come when it pulls you. You'll start feeling words bubbling up, wanting out. That's the overflow, and that's the green light. When it starts happening on its own, you let it, gently, instead of forcing it on a schedule. Load with intention, fire when it overflows. So let's put this one to bed. The speaking was never the broken part. You were pulling the trigger of a weapon that nobody told you to load. And that's the whole tragedy here. Millions of people quietly deciding that they're just not a language person because they pulled a trigger for an empty weapon on day 1, exactly like they were told to, and heard nothing but a click. But the silence you've been feeling guilty about was never you falling behind. It was always the loading. So fill the cups. Pour into your ears until understanding spills over, and let your mouth catch what overflows. Okay, so here's where to take it from here. If the question on your mind is, okay, how long do I actually load for? The silent phase calculator down in the description will give you a real answer for your language. And if you want to see how this one piece fits into the whole journey, where the silent phase sits, what comes before it, what comes after, I've got the whole video on it called the Fluency Roadmap. It lays out the entire road from your first day to your last day and shows you people who have actually done it before. And that video should be linked somewhere on your screen right now. So either go ahead and click that or wait until this one wraps and you can watch the video that's recommended at the end. Either way, the whole thing comes down to this one rule. Load first, fire second. Stop firing on empty and fill the cups. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.